It's a big question, right? Is consciousness just a fancy kind of computer program running in our heads? Or is it something else entirely? We build computers, we make them do amazing things. They can beat us at chess, they can recognize faces, they can even write poems that sound pretty good. So, it makes sense to wonder if our own minds, our ability to think, feel, and know we exist, is just a super advanced version of what a computer does. This isn't just a techie question. It's about who we are. It's about what makes us, us. If consciousness is just computation, what does that mean for our free will? For our souls, if you believe in them? For what happens when we die? It gets deep fast. So let's talk about it. Let's break down what we mean by computation and what we mean by consciousness. And then we can see if they fit together or if there's a gap between them that we just can't cross. First, what is computation? When most people hear computation, they think of math, adding numbers, figuring out percentages, but it's much more than that. At its core, computation is about processing information. Think about a simple computer. It takes in some input. Maybe you type a letter on the keyboard. That's input. The computer then does something with that input. It follows a set of rules, an algorithm to change that information. It might store the letter, it might display it on the screen, it might use it to search for something. Then it gives an output. The letter appearing on the screen is an output. So computation is basically about taking information, transforming it based on rules, and producing new information or actions. It's about states. One state leads to another state. If this, then that. It's all very logical, even when it's complex. It's a machine-like process. It can be done with silicon chips. It can be done with gears and levers. It can even be done with water flowing through pipes if you set it up right. The material doesn't matter as much as the process of information handling. Now, what about consciousness? This is much harder to pin down. When I say consciousness, I mean the feeling of being alive. The experience of seeing the color red, the taste of coffee, the ache of sadness, the joy of laughter. It's the inner world. It's what it's like to be you. It's your subjective experience. It's your awareness of yourself and the world around you. It's not just about thinking logically. A computer can solve a math problem, but does it know it solved the problem? Does it feel smart? It processes the information, it gets the right answer, but there's no inner light. No subjective experience. That's the big difference we're talking about. The feeling part. The what it's like part. When we look at our brains, they seem very much like information processors. Our eyes take in light, our ears take in sound, our skin takes in touch. These are all inputs. Our brains process these inputs. They turn them into signals, electrical signals. They're chemical signals, neurons firing. These signals travel through complex networks. They get interpreted, they get stored, they lead to thoughts, decisions, actions. Our memories are stored information, our decisions are outputs. This all sounds a lot like computation, doesn't it? Many scientists and philosophers think the brain is a computer, a biological computer. Not made of silicon, but made of cells, wetware instead of hardware, but still a machine that processes information. They argue that our thoughts, our perceptions, our very sense of self emerge from these incredibly complex computations. Think about how we recognize a face. Our eyes send raw data to the brain. The brain breaks it down. Lines, shapes, colors. It compares these to stored patterns. It figures out if it matches someone we know. All of this is a series of steps, an algorithm in a way, and it all happens incredibly fast. So, if simple recognition is computation, why wouldn't something more complex, like feeling happy, also be a form of computation? Just a much more complicated one. This view is often called functionalism. Functionalism says that what something does is more important than what it's made of. If a system takes in certain inputs and produces certain outputs, and these outputs are intelligent, then it doesn't really matter if it's made of neurons or microchips. If a machine could act exactly like a conscious human, if it could talk about its feelings, cry when sad, laugh when happy, then for all practical purposes, it is conscious. It's performing the function of consciousness. And look at the progress in artificial intelligence. The AI can now generate realistic images. It can translate languages almost perfectly. It can even write creative text. These systems are getting incredibly good at tasks that once seemed uniquely human. They are based on vast amounts of data and complex algorithms, which are forms of computation. If they keep getting better, more complex, faster, with more data, will they eventually cross a line and become conscious? Many people believe they will. They see consciousness as an emergent property, something that just pops out when computation reaches a certain level of complexity. There's even a theory called integrated information theory, or IIT. It tries to measure consciousness. It says that consciousness comes from a system's ability to integrate information. It's about how much the different parts of a system talk to each other and form a unified whole, and how much that whole is more than the sum of its parts. This theory uses computational ideas to try and quantify consciousness. It suggests that any system that can integrate information in a specific, highly complex way could be conscious, even if it's not a brain. So, on one side, we have compelling arguments. The brain looks like an information processor. AI is getting very smart, and we have theories that try to explain consciousness using computational concepts. It seems like a very strong case, but then there's the other side, the really tough questions, the ones that keep people up at night. This is often called the hard problem of consciousness. It's not about how the brain processes information, we're getting better at understanding that. The hard problem is, why does all that information processing lead to an experience? Why do we feel like something? Why do we have qualia? Qualia, that's a fancy word for those subjective qualities of experience. The redness of red, the specific taste of a particular wine, the sound of a specific musical note. These aren't just data points, they are felt experiences. A computer can detect the wavelength of red light, and it can label it red, but does it experience the redness? Does it have that inner sensation that you and I do when we see red? Most people would say no. It's just processing data. There's no inner world. This is where the idea of consciousness as computation starts to hit a wall for many. A computer can tell you the temperature, but it doesn't feel hot or cold, it just processes the numbers. A computer can generate music, but does it enjoy the music? Does it get goosebumps? It's hard to imagine how computation alone could create these subjective feelings. Let's think about John Searle's famous Chinese room argument. Imagine a person who doesn't understand Chinese sitting in a room. They have a rule book, a very detailed instruction manual written in English. When a Chinese symbol is slipped under the door, the person looks it up in the rule book. The rule book tells them exactly which Chinese symbols to write down and slip back out. To someone outside the room, it looks like the room or the person inside understands Chinese, because the outputs, the responses are correct, but the person inside, following the rules, has no understanding of Chinese at all. They are just manipulating symbols based on rules. Searle argues that this is what a computer does. It manipulates symbols, it follows rules, it processes information, it can give intelligent sounding outputs. But it doesn't understand what it's doing. It doesn't have meaning. It doesn't have consciousness. It's just running a program. The symbols have no meaning to the computer, just like the Chinese symbols have no meaning to the person in the room. This argument suggests that even if a computer could perfectly mimic human conversation, human emotions, human intelligence, it might still just be a very complex symbol manipulator without any actual inner experience. It would be a sophisticated zombie, appearing conscious but not actually being conscious. And if that's true, then consciousness can't be just computation. There must be something else. What could that something else be? Some people talk about emergence. Think about water. A single molecule of water, H2O, isn't wet. It doesn't flow. It doesn't have waves. But put billions of water molecules together and suddenly you have wetness, flow, waves. These are emergent properties. They arise from the complex interactions of many simple parts, but they aren't present in the individual parts. Maybe consciousness is like that. Maybe it emerges from the incredibly complex interactions of billions of neurons in the brain. It's not just the sum of the parts. It's a new level of organization, and maybe that emergent property is not just computation. Maybe it's a different kind of physical phenomenon that we don't fully understand yet. Something that computation helps to create, but isn't itself. Then there's the role of the body. We are not just brains in a jar. We have bodies. We interact with the world through our bodies. We feel hunger, pain, pleasure through our bodies. Our emotions are tied to our bodies. We learn about the world by moving in it, by touching it, by manipulating it. This is called embodied cognition. A computer doesn't have a body in the same way. It doesn't feel its own weight. It doesn't get hungry. It doesn't feel a gentle breeze. If consciousness is deeply tied to having a body, to sensing the world through that body, then a disembodied computation might never achieve true consciousness. It might be able to simulate these feelings, but simulation isn't the same as experience. A flight simulator can teach a pilot to fly, but the simulator itself isn't flying. It's just simulating. And what about meaning? Our thoughts, our words have meaning to us because of our life experiences, our culture, our relationships. The word love means something profound to us because of all the times we've felt it, seen it, talked about it. Can a computer truly grasp this kind of deep meaning? It can process the definition of love. It can find all the instances of the word love in text. It can even generate sentences about love. But does it feel the weight of that word? Does it understand the emotional resonance? Or is it just a very clever mimic? These are big questions without easy answers. They highlight the gap between what a computer does, processing information, following rules, and what consciousness seems to be subjective experience, feeling, understanding with meaning. So where does that leave us? Is there a middle ground? Perhaps consciousness isn't purely computation, but it relies heavily on computation. Think of it like this. A car needs an engine to run. The engine does a lot of work, takes in fuel, processes it, creates power. But the car isn't just the engine. There's the body, the steering wheel, the seats, the purpose of moving from one place to another. The engine is a critical computational component, but the whole system is more than just the engine. Maybe our brains are incredibly sophisticated biological computers. They perform billions of computations every second. And maybe consciousness is something that arises from those computations, but isn't identical to them. It's a property that the computations enable, but it's not the computation itself. Like how a symphony emerges from the individual notes and instruments, but the symphony isn't just the notes or the instruments. It's the experience of listening to them all together. Another way to think about it is that computation might be a necessary condition for consciousness, but not a sufficient one. You need the brain to do all its complex processing to be conscious. No brain, no consciousness. So computation is needed, but just having computation might not be enough. You might need something else on top of it. Some other ingredient we don't understand. What if the very stuff of reality is computational? Some physicists speculate that the universe itself might be like a giant computer. If that's true, then everything, including consciousness, would ultimately be a form of computation. But even then, we'd still have to explain the feeling part. Why does our particular computation result in a subjective experience, while other computations in the universe, like a rock sitting there, don't seem to? And what if the difference between a silicon computer and a biological brain matters? Our brains are messy. They're not perfectly precise like a digital computer. They work with probabilities. They're adaptable, they grow and change, they're deeply interconnected in ways we still don't fully map. Maybe it's this unique biological messiness, this specific wetware architecture, that gives rise to consciousness, and pure digital computation can't quite replicate it. Perhaps the specific way information is processed in our brains, involving chemistry and quantum effects, is different from the way a silicon computer processes information. And that difference is key. This question isn't just an academic debate, it has huge implications. If consciousness is computation, then theoretically we could copy it. We could upload our minds to a computer. We could achieve digital immortality. Imagine living forever as a computer program. Or imagine creating truly conscious AI. What would that mean for the rights of these machines? Would they have feelings? Would they deserve freedom? Would they be people? If consciousness is not computation, then what is it? Does it point to something non-physical? A soul? A spirit? Or does it mean there are still fundamental physical laws and phenomena about the brain that we haven't discovered yet? Something that explains the leap from information processing to subjective experience. It forces us to rethink our understanding of physics, biology, and even philosophy. It suggests we are not just complex machines, but something else, something perhaps more mysterious. Right now, we don't have a definitive answer. The debate rages on. Scientists are still trying to map the brain to understand how neurons give rise to thoughts and feelings. AI researchers are pushing the boundaries of what machines can do. Philosophers are endlessly dissecting the definitions of consciousness and computation. It's a journey of discovery. We're trying to figure out the deepest mystery of all ourselves. Whether consciousness is a form of computation or not, the question itself forces us to look closer at what it means to be alive, to think, to feel. It makes us question the very nature of reality, and that's a good thing. It keeps us wondering, exploring, and learning. It shows us that even with all our knowledge, there are still vast territories of the unknown, especially within our own minds.